Mark chapter 8 verse 27. Jesus is walking with his disciples around the villages outside Caesarea Philippi, and he asks them, who do people say that I am? And so they say, they think that you're John the Baptist back from the dead, or Elijah, or one of the prophets. But who do you say I am? And then Peter says, you're the Messiah. And then Jesus sternly orders them not to tell anyone about it. So who is Jesus? That's the big question that's dominated the Gospel of Mark. And Mark lets us in on the secret right back at chapter 1, verse 1. He said, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Messiah. So he tells us, and now we're seeing that secret being unravelled before the public gaze. So the identity of Jesus is the big deal, what's in question. But it's not so clear to everybody else apart from us, the readers. We're seeing it. It's like an Agatha Christie novel where you know who the murderer is on the first page, and now you're working out how you get to that point. So that's the drama of the gospel. And his identity is a mystery. He seems to do the things that only God can do. Like he heals the blind and the sick, and he restores the dead. He seems to say the things that only God can do, like your sins are forgiven you. But who is he? And so even the disciples are have a distorted vision at that point. Jesus is a man that they don't really know or understand. When you come to the religious leaders, they are just in a deep crisis about how to deal with the question of identity. Now, in the story that just comes before that, you've got this account of Jesus healing a blind man. You say, well, he's done that before. Yeah, but this one is unique. He puts his hands on the man's eyes, then the man sees partially. He puts his hands on again, and then the man sees fully. And it's like it's a kind of symbolism of what's going on with the way that we see Jesus. Do you see him clearly, or do you have a distorted vision? I see people like trees walking around. So it's like a kind of turning point here in Mark's gospel. The identity is coming into focus, and no longer are they going to say, who is Jesus, because he's going to make it explicit. And the identity of Jesus determines the activity, and it has a consequence in the lives of his disciples. So far he's avoided the questions about his identity. He comes to Caesarea Philippi, and he asks them, he brings the question up himself. And why Caesarea Philippi? It's got a very significant and interesting background. It was a centre of Baal worship. Did you know that? It was an ancient, the Baal's the fertility god of the Old Testament that kept sneaking into the worship of Israel. So it was a centre of Baal worship hundreds of years before, which is exactly what Elijah was confronting, wasn't it? So it's interesting that they think he's Elijah, the one who is confronting the worship of Baal. And then again, why is it called Caesarea Philippi? It was dedicated, it was like a new town, dedicated to a Roman leader, the Caesar, who was having temples built to himself. There was a shiny new temple down the road where you could worship Caesar. So they've got lots of kind of alternatives, gods, ancient and modern, all come together. And right there, right at that place, Jesus says, well, who do you think I am? There's the nice, shiny, new, huge temple, gleaming white in the desert sun. And here's the ancient, sacred stones of Baal worship, kind of Stonehenge in the background. Who do you think I am? Who am I? I guess it's one thing to say Jesus is Lord where everyone agrees with you, like on your Facebook page or in your church. But most people don't live there. In the real world, there are many competing voices for the answer, who is Lord? Who is Lord of your life? Who is your God? Actually, Jesus' first question is not what the disciples believe, it's what other people say. It's like a kind of a poll going on. You know how politicians have polls, popularity and opinion polls on different subjects so that they can plan their strategy. It's like he's first of all, he takes a poll. Who do people say that I am? He says, well, you're Elijah, And Elijah was the prophet of old, the anti-Baal prophet of old, who confronted the political situation and denounced it in the name of the holy God. A man of such holiness, so the ancient story went, that he didn't actually die. He was just taken up to heaven. So, well, if you think that I'm Elijah, that's pretty good press, isn't it? Or if you think I'm a reincarnated John the Baptist, the holy man, the man of integrity, who did the same, who confronted the political situation and died for his belief, well, that's pretty good. Maybe not quite so good, but that's good as well. It's all positive. It's all good. And then some people thought he was more generally one of the prophets, or maybe like one of the prophets. But you see, there's a thread here. Somebody who's quite confrontational, somebody who's going against the political mainstream. They're flattering ideas. So who is Jesus? There's many flattering ideas of Jesus today. You could even see Jesus as somebody who entertains. There's a kind of entertainment factor. There's a whole recording industry. There's a whole worship music industry. I'm not denigrating it. I'm saying it has to be more than that, doesn't it? There's a whole way of thinking about Jesus as a healer. Whole ministries derived from Jesus the healer, Jesus the entertainer, Jesus the healer, Jesus the political liberator. And all of them are sometimes out of line with who Jesus was according to the Gospel of Mark and the consequence of that revelation in our lives. So before we ask the question, who do we say he was? We have to know this, that identity leads to role. Identity leads to function. Jesus began to explain that his real identity had real consequences for the way that he lived and consequences in the lives of those who followed. And that ain't such good news, as we'll read on. God bless.